What is deconstruction? If you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers. Some will say it's questioning your faith. Others will say it's normal, healthy spiritual growth. Other people say it's the first stop on the way to apostasy. I was recently talking with a friend when I briefly mentioned deconstruction as an aside. He later came back to it and said, I want to talk about that. I sometimes have questions about my faith, and I was wondering, am I deconstructing? Is that deconstruction? Having questions about your faith? Or is it something more? If everyone with questions is deconstructing, then honestly, we need to lose the term entirely. Christians have had questions about their faith since the beginning. The disciples who were with the risen Jesus moments before his ascension still doubted. Were they deconstructing? If we don't come up with a definition of deconstruction that people who have actually deconstructed resonate with, then those who want to make deconstruction the evangelical boogeyman of the 2020s will come up with their own straw man definitions to defeat. And they already are. Take a look at this definition from Stand to Reason. They call deconstruction the process of pulling apart undesirable aspects of your Christian faith to make them align with culture or your own personal beliefs. Undesirable? Is that the reason people don't want to believe specific doctrines? Would an Orthodox Christian truly believe that any of their doctrines are undesirable? To make them align with culture or your own beliefs? That's the motivation behind the vast majority of people deconstructing? I don't think so. This definition might apply to a small percentage of people who are claiming to be deconstructing, but I don't believe it represents the experience as typically understood by those who have gone or are going through it. I would even argue that those who do fit into that definition of deconstruction aren't actually deconstructing. This is why we need a better definition. A definition of deconstruction needs to be broad enough to account for a wide array of circumstances that people experience, while also being narrow enough to not include things that are substantively different things. I've seen little attempt at an honest definition of deconstruction from either the progressive left or the conservative right, that I feel obligated to at least attempt to put forward a definition that hopefully more people can agree on than not. The progressive left leaves it so wide and vast that it makes it impossible for anyone who hasn't experienced it to understand what it is. If there are things that churches and pastors can do to better serve someone deconstructing, having an idea of what it is and isn't would be helpful. But the conservative right doesn't understand it, so they view it primarily as a hostile ideology that is a one-way ticket out of the faith. This is also not helpful and probably leads to even more people deconstructing. So, as someone who is in the throes of deconstruction and reconstruction for 10 years, I hope to use that experience to capture as diverse experiences as possible into a succinct definition that makes the most sense. And that's an important point. The goal of defining deconstruction is not so it can become a topic of cold study. The motive is not to gatekeep an experience in order to let some people in and keep others out, even though we could probably have another good conversation about gatekeeping. The goal is to provide a definition that helps make sense of people's experiences and provides an empathetic understanding for those who don't share those experiences. Okay, so here it is, my working definition of deconstruction. Deconstruction is a crisis of faith that leads to the questioning of core doctrines and untangling of cultural ideologies, which settles in a faith different than before. Over the course of our time together, we are going to work through this definition piece by piece. We will look closer at how deconstruction manifests itself in the 5 stages of grief, which you're about to hear more about in just a minute. And we will also look at how we can help foster reconstruction in our relationships and our churches.